I did not go to the mall for nostalgia or because I missed food courts and music echoing off tile. I came here because it was concrete, steel and glass in a world that had turned into open ground and broken fences. From the outside, the place looked dead. Half the letters on the main sign had fallen, and ivy had started to climb the lower walls. The parking lot was a graveyard of sun-faded cars and a few burned shells near the entrance. That was the part I liked. Anyone passing by would see another dead box on the horizon and keep walking towards some place that still had smoke or movement. The side delivery entrance had been my way in. The main doors at the front were still chained with thick cable, and the glass there had spiderweb cracks from something hitting it hard again and again. The delivery dock roll-up gate was half open, jammed on a crooked track. I had to squeeze under it on that first day, backpack scraping concrete, rifle clattering against the metal. I remember the smell as I pulled myself through. Old air, not rot, not yet. Just the stale mix of dust, cardboard, and the faint chemical tang that hangs in every big storeroom. I have been here for 9 days now, long enough that the silence inside feels normal, and the first floor map in my head is starting to match the one behind the "You are here" sign by the escalators. I picked them all because the emergency generators still worked. At night, the central atrium glows with low strips of emergency lights, and the exit signs shine dull red over the doors. Somewhere in the guts of the building, diesel or some backup system is still feeding power through a reduced grid. I do not use much of it. I run lights only when I need them, and unplug everything I am not using. No reason to burn through my miracle too fast. My camp is in a former kids' clothing store on the second level, near the food court balcony. The metal gate pulls down and locks. The interior has one narrow hallway that leads to the employee break room, no windows, and one emergency exit at the back that leads into the service corridor. I dragged 2 mannequins out of a department store and strapped them standing inside the main walkway with old clothes on them. From a distance, through glass or shadows, they pass for people on watch at a glance, so anyone peeking in might hesitate. It also helps me gauge my own nerves. If I flinch when I catch one in the corner of my eye, I know I am more tired than I should be. The roof is the best part. It is flat, coated in that faded white material that sticks to your boots, and ringed with a low railing. Someone had already tried to survive up there before me. I found plastic tubs full of dead soil, rusted metal poles for trellises, and a few shredded tarps zip-tied to the railings. A roof garden experiment that did not last. I fixed what I could. The sprinklers still work, triggered by the old system on a timer, and the lines run near the surface in one section. I cut and diverted one into a row of new plastic bins I scavenged from a home goods store on the first floor. I planted packets of seeds that I had gathered during the first month from every gas station and hardware store I passed. Right now, it is just damp dirt with tiny green hints when the sun cooperates, but it is something. From the highest corner of the roof, I can see past the highway to the distant neighborhoods. Every now and then, I catch movement down there in the streets between houses. A loose infected that never stopped wandering. A pack of 3 or 4 moving together, bumping into fences until they find an open yard. Once, 2 actual humans slipped between the houses, crouched low, moving with purpose. I stayed low that time and watched until they were gone. I am not avoiding all people because I hate them. I am avoiding them because I want to stay alive. Out here, a stranger is a problem first and a possible ally second. The order is important. The mall has its own perimeter of sorts. There are main entrances that I leave locked and blocked, a few emergency exits that I chain from the inside, and the loading dock where I come and go. Every morning since I moved in, I walk the ground floor with a flashlight and a pipe in hand, listening for new glass crunch, fresh drag marks, or any other clue that something changed while I slept. The air always has that muted hum from the emergency system, a faint buzz in the background. It is almost worse when the power cuts out for a second, and the entire building drops into real silence. Those moments feel wrong. 9 days in, I knew the main wings, the anchor stores, the food court, the central escalators, and the service corridors behind them. I had checked most of the small stores too, smashing display cases where I had to, prying open doors where the maglocks had failed but stayed shut. I found useful things here and there. a camping display with a few backpacks and water filters, an electronics kiosk with old portable batteries still in their sealed boxes, a sporting goods store with no firearms anymore, but boxes of 2, 2, 3 and 9mm rounds left behind, which told me whoever cleaned it out was either rushing or picky. I saw the welded storefront on my second day, but I did not pay much attention at first. It was a discount furniture place or some kind of pop-up outlet with generic branding. The metal security grille at the front had been pulled down completely and welded along the bottom where it met the tile. Not just in 1 or 2 spots. Whoever did it had run beads along most of the length, leaving only small jagged gaps where the weld skipped. The glass on either side of the gate had been covered from the inside with sheet metal bolted into the frames. In big red spray paint across what would have been the window was a message: "Do not open." I am not stupid, or at least I try not to be. The world had been shouting, "Do not open," in all kinds of ways for months now, and people still kicked doors, broke locks, and pried boards off windows because curiosity still had more weight than survival instinct. I read the letters, nodded to myself, and kept walking that day. The mall was huge, I had other things to check, and a welded gate with a warning felt like a job for some other desperate person with less to lose. The first time I noticed something off was 3 nights ago. I was lying on my sleeping pad in the back office of my little store, staring at the ceiling tiles. The emergency lights in the main corridor were dim, but enough light slipped under the closed gate that I could see the faint stripe on the floor by the door. The mall groaned every now and then with the old building sounds that I had started to recognize. A faint tick from the cooling ducts. A pop as something settled. Distant echo from the roof when wind worked on something loose. I had almost drifted off when I heard another sound. A sharp metallic scrape, then a dull thud, somewhere out toward the central atrium. I stayed still for a few breaths, listening. Sometimes it is better to encourage your mind to label a sound as old pipes or air, because once you decide it is footsteps, you do not get that comfort back. Then I heard it again. Scrape, thud, scrape, not fast. There was a rhythm to it, slow and irregular, and each impact had that heavy echo from the tile. It was coming from the direction of that welded storefront. It moved a few feet, then stopped. A minute later, it started again, closer to the main walkway that ringed the atrium. I pushed myself up and reached for the flashlight, but I did not turn it on. I had rigged a small mirror from the cosmetics store on the corner to the grate of my shop gate, angled so I could see into the hallway without putting my face right up to the bars. I crawled over to it and glanced through the reflection. The corridor outside was empty. The pale glow of the emergency strips painted everything in washed-out colors. The mannequin at the far end stood where I had left it, one arm cocked, hoodie hanging loose. No movement. The sound came again, louder this time. Scrape, thud. It was not in the corridor. It was out in the open atrium, on the first floor below me. I eased up beside the mirror and listened. Something dragged across tile, then bumped something metal. Then it all went still. I lay on the floor until my shoulders started to ache from holding myself up. Nothing. Eventually, I backed away, locked the office door, and stayed awake longer than I wanted, staring at the shadows on the wall. In the morning, I went down the central escalator with my pipe in hand and the rifle slung, every step slow and careful. The mall looks different in the daylight, even under cloudy sky filtered through skylights. Dust turns into visible strands. Old spills gain color again. I walked the perimeter of the atrium, past the dark storefronts, until I reached the welded one. The spray paint looked older in the daylight, faded at the edges. "Do not open." Someone had added a smaller line under it in black paint that I had not noticed before. Seriously. I crouched and studied the welds along the bottom. Whoever sealed this had time and enough supplies. Thick, overlapping beads fused the gate to the ground. I poked my fingers at a few of the gaps, but they were tiny, only wide enough for a coin. I wrapped the metal with the end of my pipe. The sound rang through the space but came back thin, muffled by something behind the gate. Not just emptiness. Something filled the interior space near the door. Maybe shelving, maybe piled furniture, or bodies. I frowned at that thought and stepped away. I told myself I would treat it as just another wall. I had an entire mall to worry about. One locked and welded store was a problem only if I made it one. Still, that night, when I lay down in the office, I listened again. The mall settled, hummed, and creaked. I closed my eyes and tried to think through tomorrow's plans, checking the generator, repositioning some of the roof planters to catch more sunlight, clearing a fallen display that blocked part of one service corridor. I almost drifted off. Then a sharp clang rang through the floor, clear enough that my eyes opened again without effort. Scrape, thud, a pause, another scrape. The rhythm matched metal being dragged along the gate and then dropped again. I stood up this time. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. I pulled the rifle strap over my shoulder and stepped quietly to the front of my store. Through the mirror, I studied the hallway. Empty. I worked the gate latch slowly and raised it just enough to slide under. Then I eased into the corridor with my back pressed to the wall. The emergency lights painted my boots in red and white strips. I moved along the second floor rail above the atrium, keeping low. The open center dropped down to the first floor, where kiosks sat tipped over and dead plants drooped from planters. The sound came again, now clear and directional. The welded storefront sat almost directly below my position, on the far side of the ground level. I watched that gate from above. From this angle, I could see the top half that had not been covered by sheet metal. Behind the grill, something blocked the view deep into the store. Tarps maybe, or plywood. Light did not pass through. Another clank. The gate shook slightly. Dust fell from the top edge in a faint curtain. The metal shivered once, then settled. Whatever hit it had weight. I braced the rifle on the rail and sighted in on the dark spaces between the bars. It felt ridiculous to aim at shadows, but I did it anyway. I waited. Nothing moved. The gate stayed still. The mall hummed. After maybe 5 minutes, I lowered the rifle and stayed there, crouched on the rail, just watching. An hour later, my legs complained enough that I finally stood and backed away. Nothing else happened. On the third night, the sprinklers came on in that section. I did not trigger them. The control panel for the fire system is in the security office on the first floor, near the rear hall, and I keep the main switches set to manual for most zones to avoid wasting water if a sensor bumps. This time, the panel woke me up with a soft alarm chime in my dreams, and by the time I pulled my boots on and ran down the stairs, the hallway between the welded storefront and the neighboring shoe store was raining. Water rushed down from the ceiling heads in cold, thin streams, splashing off tile and pooling under the gate. The metal was slick, black in the emergency light. I ran to the control panel and had to pause for a second to pull in enough air before I could focus on the zone diagram. A single zone flashed red. Fire detected Unit 1B. That was the code for this section. Something had tripped the heat sensor near or inside the welded store. I killed the alarm and hit the manual override for that zone. But the sprinklers kept going. The system on that loop must have jammed. I walked back toward the welded gate. Water ran under the grill in a steady thin stream, carrying dust and old bits of trash with it. A faint smell drifted out with it, sharp and stale, a mix of burned plastic and old sweat. I rapped on the metal again with the pipe. The clang was swallowed by the rush of falling water and the echo from the tile. I shouted against the noise. "Hey, is someone in there?" The question bounced off the walls and came back thinner, lost in the hiss of sprinklers. I waited with my ear inches from the gate. For a moment, nothing answered. Then, something hit the inside of the grill so hard that the metal bulged outward in front of my face. I flinched back on instinct, boots slipping slightly on the wet floor. The impact rang through the atrium, a hollow booming sound that felt wrong in the small space. There was scraping on the other side, not measured steps, more like someone stumbling into the gate, catching a foot or dragging a limb across metal shelving. A low sound slipped through the gaps, buried under the noise of water. A gurgle, a rough exhale. Not words. It never formed a syllable, just rose and fell, then cut off. I backed away until my shoulders hit the opposite storefront. I kept the pipe raised, even though that made no real sense against whatever was behind the steel. If it had been just me and the sound, I might have convinced myself that it was an infected court inside. pacing or throwing itself against the barrier. That is the simple answer. Someone sealed a few biters in there early on, painted "Do Not Open," and left. But the fire alarm bothered me. Heat sensors do not trip from nothing. Something inside had warmed up enough to trigger the system. A fire, a small generator, even a hot cooking plate could have done it. That meant something, at some point recently, had been using energy or making flame inside the sealed space. I shut off water to that whole wing at a secondary valve in the service corridor, then spent the rest of the night leaning against the wall near the welded storefront, listening through the gate. Every time I closed my eyes, the memory of that sudden bulge of metal replayed. I kept seeing the way the bars flexed, how close they came to snapping. The emergency lights pulsed slightly in the reflections on the wet floor, and the air cooled fast once the sprinklers stopped. Behind the gate, the sound died away eventually. No more scrapes, no more thumps, just the steady drip of water falling from overhead pipes. Morning brought a new problem, the outside. An alarm can travel, even muffled by building walls. When I went to the loading dock entrance for my daily perimeter check, I saw fresh tracks in the dust outside. Drag marks and a few smears, where hands or feet had worked against the concrete. The gate was still down and chained, but several infected stood at the far edge of the lot, swaying, heads tilted toward the building. One paced along the old row of shopping carts, bumping them in a loose line. Another scraped at the brick wall with broken fingers. Sound does not need to be crisp for them. It just needs to hint at presence. I watched them through a narrow slit between the dock door and the frame. The infected did not look special, just dirty, worn, and persistent. Clothes torn and stiff from old stains. One still wore a mall security uniform. The patch on the shoulder darkened. He moved with a slight hitch in one leg, stepping and dragging, stepping and dragging. His face stayed turned toward the dock area, eyes unfocused, jaw slack. He had probably been pressed against these doors for weeks, months maybe, trying to reach sounds inside. The alarm last night must have stirred them up again. I backed away and slid the lock back into place. The welded storefront was not just a weird problem anymore. It was a noise source inside my safe zone that I did not understand. If whatever was in there kept triggering alarms or banging against the gate, it would keep pulling infected toward the building. Sooner or later, a crowd would gather, and then it would not matter how thick the glass at the front doors was. Pressure and time would take care of it. I needed to know what I was living on top of. I started with the security office. There is always a security office. This one sat behind an unmarked door near the staff hallway in the back of the food court. Inside, monitors lined one wall, most dead or flickering. The main console still had some life though, showing a grid of cameras with static in most squares. I had already used this room to map a few blind spots in the mall, but I had never gone deep into the archived footage. It felt too close to watching ghosts. Today I needed those ghosts. The system had buttons for different days, weeks, and months. The timestamps only made sense up to the first blackout. After that, power had cut and reset several times, so the internal clock was wrong. I scrolled back until the parking lot cameras showed cars lined up in neat rows and people moving around them. I fast-forwarded. People rushed into the mall in heavy coats, masks on, masks off, arguments at the doors, security talking to someone in a suit. The world before the broadcasts went from concern to panic in a few hours. Watching it again on mute made my neck tense. Finally, I found the storefront. Camera 15 showed the main atrium from an elevated angle. The furniture outlet sat on the lower level, its sign glowing in gentle blue. People walked in and out, carrying picture frames and small tables and boxes. Then, over the course of an hour, traffic slowed. A group of employees dragged metal shelving to the front and leaned it against the inside of the glass. Another group rolled the security grill down. Someone brought out a welding machine on a cart. Orange sparks flashed in the corner of the screen. I rewound. There, a close-up on the door showed more detail. One of the employees, a middle-aged guy in a store polo, moved with urgency that did not match the normal pace of a closing shift. He kept glancing over his shoulder toward the interior, shouting something at unseen co-workers. Another employee rolled a figure on a hand truck through the door. The The person on the dolly slumped forward, arms tied to their sides. There was a bandage on one arm that had soaked through in a dark bloom. The employee's mouth moved in a stream of words as he pushed the dolly inside. The camera had no sound, but the desperation in his expression was clear. At one point, the man turned towards the camera. His mouth formed two distinct words. I did not need audio to read them. Help us. Then he disappeared into the store. The welding started less than a minute later. I sat back in the cracked office chair and stared at the frozen frame. The timestamp told me this had been recorded sometime in what would have been the second week of the outbreak, back when the city still had power, and the news still used phrases like isolated incidents and temporary lockdowns. The employees here had done what scared people everywhere did. They tried to seal danger in one place and label it for others. Do not open. Seriously. There was one more clip. 2 days later, one of the cameras picked up mall security standing outside the welded store with a clipboard. He talked into a radio, then slapped the metal grill once with his hand. Nothing moved inside. Eventually he left. No one came back on the footage after that. I killed the monitor and sat in the dark of the security room for a long minute, listening to the faint hum of the console. There was a person inside at some point, maybe more than one tied to a dolly, a bitten co-worker, locked in while everyone prayed for some kind of cure that never came. Whatever noise I was hearing now could be that infected still trapped inside, body somehow intact enough to move after all this time. The idea did not please me, but it made sense. Infected do not tire, and they do not stop pressing against barriers until something gives or they fall apart. I also had to consider a smaller, more uncomfortable possibility. The infected might not be the only ones in there. Supplies could have lasted for months if they rationed. A generator stolen from maintenance or a hardware shop could have kept lights and a hot plate going. Fire from that could have tripped the sprinklers 3 nights ago. If someone survived all this time, hiding behind welded steel, what would that person be now? Grateful, delirious, dangerous. I had met enough survivors by this point to know that being alive was not the same as being safe to approach. Either way, I needed better information than muffled sounds and old footage. That meant finding another way in, or at least another angle to look through. Malls have service corridors behind almost every store. Some connect, some dead end. If I could find the back door to the welded shop, maybe I could look through a crack or a vent without undoing the only thing keeping whatever was inside from walking out. The corridor behind the furniture store started near the loading dock. I slipped through the staff-only door and followed the narrow hall, passing electrical panels and storage closets. The air back there was cooler, flavored with dust and the hint of old cleaning supplies. Fluorescent fixtures hummed weakly overhead, running on the same emergency supply as everything else. Every step echoed between concrete walls. The back door to the welded shop was easy to spot, even in the dim light. A steel fire door with a push bar set into the wall between 2 other dead storefront access doors. Someone had stacked pallets and boxes in front of it from the corridor side, turning it into a barricade. I shifted one box to the side and spotted another spray-painted message on the door itself. Sealed for a reason. I ran my fingers along the seam where the door met the frame. Cold metal on metal, no telltale draft. They had probably welded this side too. I leaned close and listened. At first, all I heard was the faint rushing of blood in my ears and the low hum from overhead lights. Then, something brushed against the other side of the door. A faint scrape, barely there, like fingers testing the metal. I held my breath. The scrape came again, higher this time, closer to ear level. Then silence. No moan, no words. Just that small sound, and then nothing. I stepped back and looked up. Above the door, a narrow ventilation grate sat screwed into the wall. The black slots offered a path for air from the store into the corridor. I loosened it with a screwdriver from my belt, prying carefully until the metal plate hung loose. The opening behind it was small, maybe wide enough to slip a hand through. I unhooked the flashlight from my vest and aimed the beam into the hole. The light fell on another barrier just a few inches beyond, some kind of mesh or screen that blocked most of the view. Through the small gaps, I caught fragments. A hanging plastic sheet curved near the door, a stack of boxes, a dark stain on concrete. As I adjusted the angle, the beam brushed across something pale and round. For a second, I took it for a helmet on a shelf. Then it turned slightly. An eye reflected the light, milky and unfocused. The head it belonged to lay on the floor, twisted at an unnatural angle, lips half parted. The skin had the slack look of someone long dead, dried and puckered. The eye did not track the light. It stared through it. I pulled the flashlight back out for a moment and forced myself to take one slow breath after another until my hands steadied. Then I aimed the beam in again. This time I moved the light slowly along the floor surface beyond the grate. A second body lay sprawled across the tiles in the near darkness, limbs stiff. Both had been there long enough for the skin to turn grey, but not so long that the bones showed through. There were restraints on their wrists, belts, straps cut from furniture. The infected inside were dead for real now, or at least motionless enough that I could not see any twitch. That did not explain the movement and banging from the night before though. Something had hit the gate hard enough to rattle it. Something had tripped the fire sensor. Unless there had been a small fire in the empty space and the banging was just pipes responding to heat, the explanation did not line up. I kept the light steady, tracking along the floor and up onto the stacked furniture. Couches, cheap bookcases, mattresses leaned on end, all shoved against the front wall, probably to add weight against the inside of the gate. Then the light caught on something new. In the back corner, half hidden by a toppled wardrobe, a small glowing rectangle rested on a crate. A battery lantern, the kind sold in camping stores, still lit. The glow was weak, flickering, but it was there. Power. That meant fresh batteries, or a recent switch on. The energy to keep a light running this long, deep inside a sealed store, felt wrong. Either someone was in there still, and had been managing supplies very carefully, or power from somewhere in the mall was feeding it through a jury-rigged line. A shadow moved in front of the lantern, not a flicker from the light itself, but a solid, heavy shape crossing between the lantern and the grate. For a second, the opening went dark, then something pressed up against the mesh. A hand. The fingers jammed through small gaps where the screen had been damaged by rust. The skin was pale but not decayed, nails broken. The hand patted the metal twice, slow, feeling along the inside barrier, then moved away again. A low sound followed, muffled by the wall. It almost formed a word, but the consonants blurred together. I shut off the flashlight and stepped back until my shoulders hit the opposite wall. My mind had been busy stacking facts in neat rows, and this new piece knocked them all sideways. Someone breathing, moving, and reaching out from a sealed space full of dead co-workers and faded warnings. Someone who had been inside this welded box through months of collapse. Part of me wanted to drag the pallets completely away, cut the welds, and open that door right then. Another part pictured every bad story I had seen play out since the first sirens. Starving survivors who attacked the first person who came near. Not out of evil, but out of raw, panicked instinct. People hiding bite marks under sleeves until it was too late. Someone trapped alone for months would not be normal. I was not exactly normal anymore either, but at least I had space and sky and the option to move. I needed to talk to whoever or whatever that was without giving up the only barrier we had between us. I took a breath, stepped back up to the door, and raised my voice toward the vent. "Can you hear me?" At first, nothing. Then a shuffle on the other side, followed by a soft, hoarse sound. A few words pushed their way through, warped by metal and distance. Who is that?" The voice was rough, worn out, but unmistakably human. Male probably, though the strain warped the pitch. Relief and unease tangled together in my mind. Human meant possible conversation. It also meant questions I might not want to answer, and demands I might not be able to meet. "I am on the other side of the back door," I called. "In the service hallway. You are in the furniture store, right? It is sealed. I saw the welds." A low laugh bubbled through the vent, short and bitter. "Yeah," the voice said. "That is what they did. Sealed it. Thought they were clever." A cough broke his words. It sounded dry, from a throat that had not had enough water in a while. "You alone out there?" It was not a casual question. People always ask that first now, even if they pretend they are asking anything else. Alone or not means opportunity or risk. I chose the partial truth. I am on my own in here, I said, at least in this hallway. I live in the mall now, for the moment. He wheezed out another breath. Good spot. Took us a while to figure that out. Too late by then. A pause stretched, filled only by the faint drip of water somewhere beyond the wall. You thinking about letting me out? He went straight there, no small talk. I respected that, even as my stomach knotted. He had probably been waiting behind that barrier, counting the days, dreaming about someone walking past who might have tools and not have abandoned him on purpose. Resentment must sit hard in that kind of isolation. I am thinking about how to keep this place from turning into a beacon, I answered. You hit the front gate hard the other night. That and the sprinkler alarm pulled infected toward the building. There are 6, maybe 8, outside right now because of the noise. If a crowd forms, I have to leave. I do not want to leave, so I need to understand what is happening in there. Silence. I could almost hear him weighing my words, sorting honest concern from self-interest. After a long moment, he spoke again, quieter. That alarm was not my fault, he said. Battery pack overheated. I tried to rig some extra light from an old inverter. Guess the sensor did not like the heat. Sprinklers came on in here too, soaked everything. A faint rustle followed his words, maybe him shifting position. I did hit the gate though. I heard someone. I thought someone was finally coming back. The people who sealed you in, I asked. Them, mall security. Couple of soldiers too, near the end. Bitterness sharpened his tone. Said it was a quarantine. Said they would come back in 72 hours when the docs had more news. I remember numbers like that. 72 hours came and went. I kept track for a while. Hard to tell time now. His words were starting to spill faster, pressured by the dam finally cracking. I raised a hand even though he could not see it, steadying my own thoughts. What bit you? I asked. Or who? Silence dropped again. When he spoke, his voice held a new edge. You think I am infected, he said. You think I am in here because I turned. I think someone inside got bitten, I said carefully. I saw bodies in there, tied down. I saw one on the old footage. You tell me how it started. He laughed again, a short bark. Of course you watched the cameras. Another cough. We brought in a woman from the parking lot. Security shot her husband when he would not calm down. She had a bite on the arm, said she caught it on the fence. We all knew that was not true anymore, but no one wanted to say it. Manager told us to keep her in the back until help arrived. Then people started hearing things. Screaming at night, scratching. After 2 days, security told us to lock the store, keep everyone out, and keep her in. Problem was, we were already in there. He stopped. When he resumed, his voice roughened. I am not bitten, he said. I helped tie her down. I helped feed her when she begged. I slept on the floor by the door in case she got loose. When she died, they told us to stay with the body until the med team came. Med team never came. When she stood back up, we learned the rest. I closed my eyes for a second, picturing the scene. That floor, those straps, the first waking of the dead in a small store heavy with furniture polish and fear, locked in a box with something no one truly understood yet. That would etch lines into a person's mind that never faded. How many of you were there? I asked. 4 at first, he said, then 2 after the second day, then just me. I let that sit between us. There was no point in asking for every detail. I had heard enough similar stories, different rooms and different faces. Same ending. People dragged their loved ones into stock rooms and basements, promised to watch them, then either died or ran. When those loved ones reanimated, the ones who stayed and fought usually did not make it either. What is your name? I asked instead. Ethan, he said after a pause. Furniture guy. Used to hate this job. Now the irony keeps me busy. I am Mark, I said. Names matter. They anchor people. All right, Ethan. Here is where I am at. This mall is the safest place I have found in weeks. The welded cage you live in sits right at the center of it. You are making noise in there, even when you do not mean to. The infected outside hear that. So for me to stay, I have to either guarantee you will not turn this place into a drum, or move on to somewhere worse. I am not thrilled about leaving a decent hideout. I am also not thrilled about opening the door to someone I do not know who has been locked in a room with corpses and trauma for months. So we need rules. On the other side of the door, he muttered something I did not catch, then said, "You sound like my manager." "Your manager probably had a clipboard," I said. "I have a rifle and a limited supply of patience. Different tool set, same need for order." Silence, then a soft chuckle. "All right, Mark, what are your rules?" "First rule," I said. "No more slamming the gate. If you hear something out there, call through the vent, not through the metal. If you trip any more alarms, I will shut off power to this whole side, and you will be sitting in darkness with no sprinklers. Second, you tell me exactly what supplies you have left. Food, water, batteries, anything. Third, you describe your body. Every mark, every bite, every scratch that might have broken skin since the day you were sealed in. If you lie and I find out later, I keep the welds and move on. Understood?" For a long 30 seconds, I heard nothing through the vent except his breathing. Then he answered, voice flat. "I do not have a bite," he said. "No scratch. I got clipped on the shoulder by a shelf when we were wrestling her down, but it did not break skin. You can check when you get brave enough to open something. Food. I am on the last of the canned stuff. Maybe 3 days if I stretch it. Water. I catch from the sprinklers when they go off and ration what is left in the jugs we stored. Back when the mall still ran its own fire tests and alarms in the early days. Those heads opened more than once, and I saved everything I could. No fresh in days now. Batteries are nearly gone. Lantern is running on the last one that works. I keep it dim to save power." His voice trembled slightly at that last admission. The idea of darkness inside a welded box where the dead used to pull at your clothes would be enough to unsteady anyone. When the light goes, your head fills the space with whatever it fears most. "All right," I said. "Last question. Have the bodies moved recently?" He laughed once, sharp. "You think I do not watch them every second I can? If one finger twitched, I would know. They stopped a long time ago. Bones in straps. That is all." The banging I had heard then had been him. Frustration hitting metal. Or maybe a panic episode. The fire alarm had been his jury-rigged power solution failing out. I believed most of what he said. The details lined up with what I had seen through the vent. That did not mean everything was safe, but it gave me a map. "I can get you water," I said. "Running some through the vent will be messy, but I can rig something. Food will be trickier. I have enough for myself if I ration. If I split it, we both get thinner. That means if I choose to help you, you are taking part of my margin. I want you to understand that." "Why are you even here then?" he asked. "If you see me as a drain, you could walk away right now, pretend you never heard a thing. Lock up your little shop and let me go quiet in here. World would keep turning." He was not wrong. The old version of me might have walked away. The man who had stood in a grocery store at the start of all this, watching people fight over toilet paper, might have pushed a cart around the wreckage and kept his eyes down. That man did not make it very far. The one who remained had seen enough people die that doing nothing when a voice called for help felt worse than the risk of doing something. "Because I am stuck here with you whether I like it or not," I said finally. "A welded box full of noise in the middle of my safe zone is already my problem. Opening it might be a bigger problem, or it might solve one. Leaving you inside without food and water means eventually you turn from a human problem into a corpse problem. Corpses turn into something else in this world real fast. I would rather have a starving man I can make deals with than a body that might stand back up when I am not looking." He took that in. When he spoke again, some of the edge had drained from his voice. "You talk like someone who had to bury more than one person," he said. "Something like that," I said. "Here is what I am going to do. I am not cutting those welds yet. I will run a hose from one of the intact sprinkler lines into that vent. I can secure it with tape and some brackets. You will get a slow, steady trickle into whatever container you put under it. Enough to drink, not enough to flood you. I will also drop a few cans through if I can widen the vent slot safely. We will try this arrangement for a few days. You stay quiet. No alarms. No gate slamming. I watch you through the vent every time I pass and listen for anything off. If that goes well, we talk about opening one side of the back door a few inches and putting a chain on it. One step at a time. No promises beyond that. On the other side, he exhaled slowly. You sound like you were in the service, he said, or a contractor, all plans and contingencies. IT department, I said. Different kind of disaster planning, same idea. He snorted. Figures. I spent the next few hours fetching supplies. A length of hose from the maintenance room, duct tape from a hardware kiosk, a handful of canned vegetables and beans from my stash. I diverted a small part of the sprinkler line in the corridor ceiling, cursing under my breath as rusty water spilled down my arms. I fed the hose through the vent and taped it solid, then opened the valve just enough to send a slow stream down into his side. He caught it in something metal. The sound of water hitting a container carried through the vent with a clarity that felt too intimate. A survival sound. I widened one corner of the vent with my screwdriver until I could push a small can through. My fingers scraped metal. On the other side, his fingertips brushed mine as he took the can. The contact was light but real, a stranger's skin, dry and warm. I withdrew my hand fast, more from surprise than fear, then laughed softly at myself. For the first time in days, the mall did not feel entirely empty. By late afternoon, the infected outside had drifted along the edge of the lot, drawn away by some distant sound or scent. I checked the front doors from the second-floor balcony. A few bodies pressed against the glass, leaving smears and marks, but the main horde had not materialized yet. The mall still held. The welded box in its center now contained a man with a hose and 3 cans of food instead of just old bodies and desperation. Progress of a strange kind. That night, I lay in my store again, staring at the ceiling. The scrape thud pattern did not repeat. Instead, faint noises drifted through the building. A quiet clink from Ethan's side of the wall as he shifted containers. The soft murmur of his voice when he spoke to himself. Words too low to make out. It reminded me of neighbors in old apartment buildings. The way their lives filtered through plaster in hints and fragments. Noisy enough to remind you others existed. Quiet enough that you could still pretend you lived alone if that was easier. Sometime past midnight, the power flickered. The emergency lights cut out, plunging the corridor outside into dark, then snapped back on at a lower brightness. I sat up quickly and listened. The hum from the generator deep in the building sounded rougher, as if something strained. If the backup finally died, this place would turn into a cold concrete cave. The roof garden would dry out without the sprinkler timers. The refrigerated air that kept rot smells from becoming unbearable would vanish. I threw on my boots and headed for the security room. The main power panel there showed a warning I had not seen before. Fuel low. Generator 1. Estimated runtime, 48 hours. That clear number hit harder than I expected. A countdown on a screen in a world that had gone mostly analog turned the situation into a simple choice in my head. Stay and adapt, or leave before everything went dark. If the generator died, Ethan's light would fail unless he had some hidden trick. My roof sprouts would shrivel. The mall's greatest advantage would disappear. I could try to find more fuel, but that meant running a hose or hauling cans past those infected at the perimeter, maybe through streets I had not scouted deeply enough. Every choice now bounced off a dozen others. Leave the mall before the lights go out. Stay and accept the dark, relying on its walls alone. Invest in keeping a stranger alive when supplying him meant burning through resources faster. Survival had become a constant ledger of trade-offs. I went back to the corridor behind Ethan's door. He must have heard the change in the building too, because his voice came through the vent before I said anything. Lights dipped, he said. Even in here, something wrong. Fuel is running out, I said. 2 days maybe, if the system is honest. After that, it goes dark. Sprinklers too. He was quiet for a moment. Then, In a tone that mixed resignation and something close to relief, he said, "Maybe that is the universe saying it is time to open the door." "Or time for both of us to leave," I countered. "You really think you can walk me past whatever is outside?" he asked. "You can sneak alone. 2 people make more noise. One of them has not seen sunlight in months and might pass out on the stairs." He was not underselling the risk. Leading an unsteady man through dark corridors and across open parking lot ground, with infected drifting nearby, was a good way to end up dragging dead weight. I pictured hauling him over my shoulder while hands clawed at my jacket. The image sat heavy in my mind. "Better than letting you die in a box," I said, softer than I meant to. There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Some of the energy had leaked out, replaced by something tired and firm. "I have been thinking about that," he said, "about whether this welded cage is just a slower grave, or if it is something else. The way I see it, all this time, I have been the reason no one opened those gates. People saw the welds and the signs, heard the noises, and walked away. You might be the first one stubborn enough to do more than that. Someone has to be that person. Someone has to make the hard call about whether it is safer to keep certain doors closed forever. Maybe that is my job now." I frowned, not sure where he was going. "What are you saying?" "I am saying this place already took 3 people," he said. "Took pieces of me too, even if my body is still here. I do not know what I would do out there anymore. I have spent so long in this box that the world beyond it feels like a story. You sound like you still remember moving through it, making choices, meeting others. Maybe you are the one who should carry the memory of what happened in here. Not me. That is what I mean by job." My grip tightened on the edge of the vent frame. "Do not talk like you are already gone," I snapped. "You are alive. That still counts for something." He chuckled, a rough sound. "Says the man who met me through a hole in the wall and immediately started writing rules." "There is another option," I said. "We reinforce the back door from this side, grind a small section of weld, just enough to open a gap at the top. I put a bar through on a chain, and we use that as a pass-through. You stay inside for now, but you are not completely cut off. If the generator dies, we create a small hatch instead of leaving you sealed in the dark. It will cost me time and tools, but it keeps both choices open." He was quiet for a long time. I started to wonder if he had walked away. Then his voice floated through again, softer. "You are really not good at leaving things alone, are you?" he said. "Not when those things slam into doors and bring dead crowds to my front step," I said, "and not when those things talk back." "All right," he said, "make your hatch. If the power dies, we use it. If you decide tomorrow that I am too much trouble, you can weld the new seam shut again. At least then, I will know someone looked me in the face before turning the key." The work was slower than I wanted. I did not have proper cutting tools, just a battery grinder I had taken from a hardware store and a limited number of charge cycles left on my solar chargers. I chose a section of the weld along the top of the door frame and worked at it in bursts, teeth grinding at the shriek of metal under the spinning disc. Every time sparks flew, I pictured the smoke slipping through cracks, scenting the air outside, inviting attention. Between passes, I paused to listen for movement in the mall. Ethan stayed on the other side of the door, talking sometimes, quiet others. He told me about his co-workers in disjointed pieces. A young guy who had just started 2 weeks before the outbreak, always late from the bus. A woman who stole extra break minutes out back to watch videos on her phone, complaining about her parents. None of them had signed up to die in a closed room behind a welded gate. No one ever does. Yet here we were. After 2 hours of careful cutting, I managed to open a small gap between the top of the door and the frame. I threaded a short metal rod through on a length of chain, fixing the other end to a bracket in the wall. The door could now flex about 2 inches at the top without swinging fully open. Enough to pass a can through. Enough for light and air to slip in more freely once the generator quit. Not enough for a person or an arm. When I finally tested it, Ethan pressed his eye up to the gap from inside. For the first time, we saw pieces of each other properly. One bloodshot eye surrounded by dark circles peered out. On my side, he would see a tired face, beard scruff, and the wary gaze of a man who had not slept deeply in months. We studied each other for a few seconds, both aware that this thin line of sight was the closest thing to real contact we would get for a while. "You look normal," he said quietly. "You do not," I answered, but there was no harshness in it. He laughed, and for a moment, the sound in the corridor felt almost human again. Night fell again. I rationed my own batteries and lights carefully, using only a small headlamp for essential tasks. The generator hummed on, but the knowledge of that 48-hour timer sat in the back of my mind. Out beyond the mall, the world kept decaying in its slow, relentless way. Houses slumped, cars rusted, people vanished quietly or violently. In here, I had carved out a fragile pocket of control around a patch of roof garden and a welded door with a chain hatch. Sometime in the early hours, I woke to a new sound. Not the scrape of metal, not the hum of machines. It was a faint crack from somewhere above, followed by a rumble and a distant crash. Dust drifted down from the ceiling afterwards, speckling the air in my flashlight beam. I grabbed my rifle and moved toward the atrium in a half-crouch, instinct singing a warning even without named sensations. The central skylight had fractured. A branch from a dead tree at the edge of the property, weakened by wind and time, had finally given up and fallen through the glass. Large shards now lay scattered across the lower floor, glittering in the dim emergency light. The opening above exposed the atrium to the sky. Cool air poured in, bringing with it the distant moan of infected from somewhere down the road. The new hole would let rain in too, which meant rust and mold and other problems later. I stepped carefully around the glass and looked up. Through the jagged frame, the sky showed a thin grey morning light. A crow sat on the broken branch, head tilted, taking in the view. It flapped away when it noticed me. The gap was too high for anything to climb through easily, but sound would travel more freely now. That meant the noises inside mattered even more. Ethan called through the vent a few minutes later. "Heard that out here," he said. "Roof giving up?" "Tree punched through the skylight," I said. "No direct access, but more noise will escape. We have to stay quieter now." He grunted. "The world really wants this place to crack open." "I am trying to keep the seams together," I answered, "but I am not sure how long that is realistic." The next day passed in a blur of patchwork. I dragged broken kiosks under the skylight to catch larger glass pieces before they slid further. I moved the roof planters away from any new leak paths. I checked the generator room, a cavern of steel pipes and noise in the sub-basement, and confirmed the fuel gauge with my own eyes. The tank was lower than I liked. I did the math on how many trips it would take to haul enough fuel from the nearest station to buy us another week. Each trip would be a small war with the outside. In between tasks, I checked on Ethan. He sounded stronger with water in him, less rasp in his words, more bite in his jokes. He asked about the sky, the temperature, whether there were birds. He told me little stories about customers from before everything fell apart. An older couple who argued about couch colors in front of him for an hour. A kid who built a fort out of display cushions while his parents filled out credit forms. Listening to him talk about ordinary frustrations from the old world reminded me that he was not just the man in the box. He had stood in line at coffee shops, cursed at traffic, and ignored mall music just like everyone else. On the second night after the warning on the generator panel, the hum cut off. No flicker this time. No warning beep. One moment I could see the faint glow from emergency strips around my store. The next, the mall went black. The silence that followed pressed in from every direction. It was the first time since I arrived that the building had truly gone still. I sat up on my sleeping pad and waited, ears straining. In the darkness, small sounds grew louder. A drip somewhere near the restroom, the rustle of my own jacket when I moved. Far away, beyond thick walls, a faint chorus of distant groans rose and fell, carried through the broken skylight and the thin morning air beyond it. Without the generator's hum, the difference between inside and outside felt thinner. I turned on my headlamp, the cone of light cutting a narrow path through the gloom. Batteries were now precious, but stumbling in the dark and cracking my skull on an escalator rail would be a stupid way to go. I made my way down to the service corridor. Ethan's voice came through the vent before I even greeted him. "Lights are gone," he said. "Just me and that little lantern now. It is dimmer." "The generator is done," I said. "No more emergency power. From here on, this building is just walls and shadows." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Welcome to my world." I uncapped my own lantern and clicked it on, holding it up near the new hatch. Soft light spilled through the gap and into his side. The faint glow of his previous lantern flickered back. Our two small circles of light met in the narrow space and overlapped slightly. I saw more of his face now. Hollow cheeks, scruff, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat and old grime. His eyes looked sharp though, alert, not cloudy. "So," he said, "is this when you decide if you are staying in your little kingdom or packing up and trusting the roads again?" I leaned against the wall, lantern balanced on my knee. "That is the decision, yeah." "Does my presence in this box make it harder or easier?" he asked. "Both," I said honestly. "Harder because now I have someone else to factor into the equation. Easier because the idea of walking out of here and pretending this welded store never existed feels worse than it did when I first got here. Once you put a voice to a door, you cannot turn it back into just metal." He nodded slowly. "You are not responsible for me," he said. "Remember that. Whatever decision you make next, you walked into this mess by chance. I was already here." "Responsibility does not care about who started a situation," I said. "It cares about who is standing nearest to it when decisions have to be made." We sat in silence for a while, each lost in separate calculations. If I stayed, I could fortify the entrances further, adapt to the dark, use the mall's stores as a long-term resource. But without power, the benefits of the sprinkler system and climate control vanished. The roof garden might survive if I hand-watered it, but every gallon I carried up there would be a gallon not used for drinking or washing. If I left, I went back to moving every night, never knowing if the next building I slept in had worse secrets than a welded door. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "Here is my suggestion," he said. "You do what you were going to do before you found me. If the plan was to stay until the generator died, and then move on, you follow that. You do not alter your whole reason for living because someone you met through a vent made you feel guilty. You leave the hose running, stock my side with as many cans as you can spare, and then you go. The welds stay. The hatch gives me a chance to see at least one more face today. That is already more than I expected when I woke up 3 days ago." It was a clean plan, simple, but simple plans in this world always carry little barbs. "If I leave, your noise problem becomes my problem again anyway," I said. "If you panic and start hitting the gate or if something happens in there, this building will keep broadcasting that event out through the broken skylight. Infected will keep coming. Maybe one day a group of survivors will reach this place because they heard the noise. They might get killed at the doors by the crowd outside. That becomes another graveyard on the list, and I will know I walked away from the switch that could have changed it." He sighed. "So what is your alternative? Put me down through the hatch. Throw something in here and listen until everything gets quiet. You do not strike me as that kind of person." "No," I said. "I am not. Yet." I thought about the employees on that old footage, welding the gate and painting warnings. They had believed they were doing the right thing too. Seal the threat inside, save the people outside. The problem is, those people outside kept moving, and the welded box with its contents stayed. Permanent danger in a world where everything else flowed. "There is a third option," I said eventually. "I stay one more day. Today. We do what we should have done from the start. We empty that store of its dead. We clear the bodies so there is no question about what is moving in there. We make sure that store has a solid barrier and a clear warning for whoever comes after. Something that holds because someone maintained it, not because someone was trapped behind it. Then we decide if you can walk out or if this stays your bunker." Ethan swore softly under his breath, the mild kind of word that still carried weight in this quiet. "You want to open the front gate in a mall with no power and a broken skylight," he said. "You really are determined to test the limits of our luck." I will not open it fully, I said. We will create an inner barrier with shelves and straps. I will stand in the corridor with the rifle. You will move the bodies slowly to the back door, and we will pass them through the hatch piece by piece. Then I will haul them to the loading dock and throw them into the burn pit. No more dead weight behind your walls. That is a lot of work, he said, and you hate opening doors. I hate unknowns more, I answered. The day that followed was hard, dirty and necessary. I reinforced the inside of the back door with a second chain, minimizing the gap even more while we worked. I looped an old tie-down strap through the hatch to serve as a body sling. Ethan, on his side, dragged the first of the dead co-workers to the door. His grunts and soft curses filtered through as he wrestled with stiff limbs and straps that had bitten into old flesh. When he had the first one in position, we worked together, guiding the weight through the narrow gap in awkward angles. The bodies were lighter than I expected. Dehydration and time reduce weight in a way that never stops feeling wrong. I did not linger on their faces. I dragged them down the service corridor on an old rubber mat, out a side exit I had unchained just long enough to pass through, and into a concrete drainage area behind the dock where I had already burned infected once before. The smell would be bad, but the wind usually carried it away from the main doors. Ash does not climb fences. By the time we finished with the second body, sweat ran into my eyes despite the cool air in the corridor, and my hands ached from gripping cloth and bone-through gloves. Ethan sounded worse. Each time he pushed another limb into our makeshift sling, his breathing came harder. One of the original 4 had bolted before security finished sealing the store, he had told me. So only these 2 had died in here. With every corpse removed, the weight in that room shifted. The store behind the welds was no longer a tomb. It was a cell with one living occupant and some scattered furniture, a more honest kind of prison. When the last of the dead was gone, we sat on opposite sides of the hatch, catching our breath. The hose still trickled water into his container. My lantern glow flickered across the narrow space. That is it, he said. No more ghosts in here, just me and a lot of bad memories. Memories do not moan against gates, I said. That is an improvement. He laughed weakly. You have a way of putting things. We both knew what came next. The mall had no power. The skylight was broken. The infected outside would keep drifting by. I had one more night before I would have to travel again regardless. The question was whether I walked out alone or found a way to bring one exhausted furniture salesman with me. As sunset slid through the broken skylight and painted thin orange bands across the atrium, I climbed in silence to the roof. The tubs of soil up there glistened from the last hand-watering I had done. Tiny green leaves poked up in uneven rows. A small, stubborn promise of food months from now, if no one knocked the tubs over or trampled them in a panic. I ran my fingers across the edge of one planter, then stood at the railing and looked out over the parking lot. 3 infected wandered near the far exit, slow and aimless. One bumped into an abandoned sedan, rebounded, then changed direction without thought. Beyond them, the highway lay still, a long line of dead metal and cracked asphalt. In the distance, smoke from some distant fire smudged the horizon. No sirens, no headlights, just the new normal. Down below, under my feet, a man waited in a welded room with a hose and a hatch, trusting me to decide whether his world expanded beyond 4 walls again. The thought sat in my chest with more weight than any rifle. In the end, I chose movement. Not because I thought the mall could not serve as a fortress without power, but because I had seen what staying in one place too long did to a mind. Ethan's voice through the vent had been a warning. The world outside was cruel and unpredictable, but at least it contained change. Inside that welded box, days blurred until he lost any real sense of sequence. He had survived that once. I doubted he could do it again if I left him behind. The next morning, before dawn, I packed my gear. Backpack, rifle, water filter, ammunition, a few tools. I filled 2 extra jugs in case station pumps were dry at the next town. Then I went to the corridor one last time. Ethan was already at the hatch, dark eyes watching the sliver of light from my lantern. You decided, he said. He sounded calm. I did, I said. We are leaving. He stared at me through the gap for several seconds. "We," he repeated. "We," I said. "You will not make it on your own if I just cut you loose. I will not pretend otherwise. But if we move together slowly, with me clearing the way, you have a chance. It will not be pretty. You will have to push through a lot of fear fast. You still have a body that works more or less. That is more than your co-workers got. I am not going to leave you in a steel box that was never meant to be your coffin." He swallowed. I could see the movement in his throat even through the narrow gap. "What about the mall?" he asked. "You spent days reinforcing this place." "The mall will still be here," I said. "Empty, dark, and quieter than it was. Maybe someone else will stumble on it one day. Maybe not. Either way, they will not have to worry about welded doors with unknown things behind them. We cleared that ledger. That is enough." He nodded once. Sharp. "All right, Mark," he said. "Open your door." It took another hour to cut the remaining welds enough for the back door to swing outward. I left the chains on until the last possible moment, ready to slam and lock if anything unexpected lunged from the gap. When I finally eased it open, the smell that rolled out was a dense mix of dust, old sweat, and faint rot clinging to the walls. No fresh sweetness of infection, just the stale air of a room too long closed. Ethan stood just inside the threshold. He squinted at the hallway light, raising a hand to shield his eyes. His skin had that pale, indoor cast that people used to get from working overnight shifts. His clothes hung loose on a thinner frame. He leaned on a makeshift cane fashioned from a chair leg. For a moment he wavered, as if the hallway might tilt under him, then he steadied. "Brighter than I remember," he murmured. "Wait until you see the skylight," I said. "You will love the view." He offered a strained smile. I slung one of his arms over my shoulder, feeling the fragility of bone and muscle there. Together we stepped out of the welded store and into the corridor. Behind us, the sign on the front gate still read, "Do not open," in big red letters. For the first time since those words were painted, someone had done it and lived. We moved slowly through the mall, circling wide around patches of glass and debris. I took him to the atrium and let him stand under the broken skylight. He stared up at the slice of sky framed by jagged edges, eyes shining in the early light. For a moment, he looked less like a man who had been locked in a tomb and more like someone standing at the threshold of a new day, even if that day was full of dangerous roads and dead streets. "Ready?" I asked. "No," he said honestly, "but go anyway." We reached the loading dock door. I listened at the seam. No scraping just outside. No clumsy bumping against the metal. I eased the door up an inch and peered through. The parking lot lay in flat morning grey. Two infected wandered near the far row of cars, distant enough that we could slip under and head for the cover of a delivery truck without catching their attention if we moved quickly and stayed low. I looked back at the dim interior of the mall one last time. The racks, the mannequins, the quiet corridors. The welded storefront door now stood open, shadows curling inside. The mall had been a fortress and a trap, a refuge and a box of secrets. I had slept in its halls, eaten under its skylight, listened to its bones creak under wind. I had met a man through its vents and cut him loose from its welded ribs. That was enough history for one place. "Come on," I said to Ethan. "Stay low, stay quiet, watch my back." He nodded, jaw clenched, grip tight on his cane. Together we slipped under the dock door and into the bright cold air. Behind us, the mall stood silent. The emergency lights would never come on again. The sprinklers would stay dry. The welded storefront would slowly rust, its warning fading. Somewhere out there, another building waited, full of its own strange rules and hidden rooms. I did not know if this new path would end any better than the last one. I only knew that walking away from that welded box with another pair of footsteps beside mine felt more right than closing it back up and pretending it was not my concern. In a world full of doors that should have stayed shut, I had chosen to open one and accept what came with it. That choice would follow me wherever I camped next. And that's where we'll stop for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me how the story hit you, what moments worked, what didn't, and what you'd want to hear next. And a big thank you to everyone supporting the channel, especially with extra membership: Carlos Herrera, The Great Anywho, Jadala, Madam Midnight, Deborah Powell, William Blackwell. You keep this project alive. Until next time, Survivor. Jack's Nightmares signing off.